And now, you're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello, everyone out there in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Sports Podcast. I am here, like I am every week, to cover the Rowdies with my usual co-host, Carlos. How are you doing, Carlos, on this Thursday evening?
It's a lovely Thursday night. Yesterday. Went to my last Georgetown basketball game in person as a student, feeling nostalgic for a program that has given me nothing over the last 3 years. But
that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. For context, I saw a total of one Big East win in person in my entire time here. That first year was COVID, so I wasn't there. And then, there was one game on campus that we won while students were here. And there was maybe like 30 students in the stands for that one. So I'm proud to be one of those few students that have seen the Big East win on this campus. James, you know what? College basketball is fun, but even more fun than that, Tampa Bay Rowdy soccer. And it's coming up real soon.
Yep.
Very, very soon. Just a few weeks away now. We're kind of getting to that crunch time. Preseason results kind of keep coming in. We'll talk about one of those games in a little bit. Things are coming together, James. So I can't complain. It's starting to feel like Christmas, like they say, right?
Yeah, right.
What about you? What's going on in your life before we talk about any of the Rowdy stuff?
Nothing too much, nothing too different. As you said, though, the Rowdies are getting closer. They had a game this past weekend that we actually do need to give a little bit of context for, a little bit of talking about, because we don't have a ton of information. Neither of us could be there. And unfortunately, it looks like there wasn't that big of a crowd because it somehow was one of the colder nights in Florida while it was also rainy. You know, I think that a lot of us are used to rain, but with that and the temperature being in the 60s, I don't know that there are many Floridians who are used to that specifically. So it seems like not that many people actually decided to make the trek. Either way, we will still have a little bit of coverage for that one coming up here. So, we will need to talk about that and a couple of other Rowdies news tidbits before we get into the second part of our Eastern Conference preview. As we said last week, we are breaking up each conference into 2 tiers. Should have been 3, but we don't have that much time. And we don't honestly need to spend that much time, I think, focused on all the other teams as a Rowdies-focused podcast. You know, if we were covering the whole league, maybe we could break it down a little bit more. But I think, Carlos, we're doing more than enough for what our remit is with the Rowdies.
Absolutely, James. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to say. We are really cramming a lot into this one episode. Last week, we crammed a lot into that episode as well. So I'll shut my mouth and let you take it away so we can jump into it.
All right. Well, 2 quick things to hit on before we actually get to the news this week. First of all, congrats to our former interviewee, Madison Cox, and the Puerto Rican national team. Not only did they qualify for the Women's Gold Cup, they did so in kind of stunning fashion. Their goal in a 1-0 win over Haiti was off of a penalty. They also conceded a penalty, and their keeper saved it. So it was stunning. I thought it was fair that the penalty did not result in a goal. I'll just leave it like that. I wasn't convinced that it was the most correct of penalty calls, but I am not the referee, and regardless, Puerto Rico still won the game. So that was awesome. I retweeted it for anybody who follows me on Twitter. And similarly, they had their first game last night. Unfortunately, it was a 1-0 loss to Brazil. In all honesty, your first major tournament game coming against Brazil and you only lose 1-0, that's really not that bad. In fact, it's quite good. They've held Brazil out until the 80th minute, I think, the 80th, 81st. It was still, a loss, but it's as good a loss as I think you can get for your first ever game. So I'm really happy for them in their major tournament debut. They deserve it, and they're looking good to, go up against these next 2 teams. It's going to be tough, especially against Colombia, I think, but they're looking like a solid unit, and they know how to play to grind out a result if that's what they need to do. And I'm really happy for them. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, of course, please like and subscribe to us on YouTube, any major podcast platform that you use. We are there. And on social media, if you could join us as well. We are on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, wherever else. We are everywhere. At RBLR Sports. Now, Carlos, I will hop into the USL news first, and then I will turn it over to you. Because I think I know possibly a little bit more about the 2 players that we have mentioned here. One is Orange County signing Sofiane Jafal And then San Antonio signing Kendall Burks. These are both players who were in MLS last season, and they're coming down to USL this year. Sofiane Jafal was one of the higher rated players out of college soccer when he graduated, I think 2 years ago. He spent some time with Austin, and I think he spent some time with DC last year, but he was a pretty good player, especially in college. He was a bit part player in MLS, which, you might expect. And as much as he was doing relatively well there, I am assuming that whatever teams were looking at him decided they could use the money for his contract better somewhere else. So, unfortunate for him, but ultimately pretty fortunate for Orange County. They get a very good player originally from France. And, that's a big boost to their roster because they haven't seen a ton of movement for them that looks to be in the positive category so far. There is some, obviously, but I think that he's one of the better players that they've signed in this offseason. And the second player, San Antonio, getting Kendall Burks. He was another player who was pretty highly rated out of college, and he was with Seattle Sounders. No, I'm sorry, he was with Chicago Fire. He was originally from the Seattle area, but he was with the Chicago Fire during his time in MLS. And he was another bit part player, but he did get some pretty good playing time for a rookie season. They wanted to spend their money again on somebody else, so fair enough. San Antonio brought him in, and I think that is a pretty good signing for their back line. It really shores them up as a defensive unit that we all kind of know San Antonio to be, although supposedly they want to play a different way this year. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, those are the two first bits of news. And then Carlos, I'll let you take it away because there's even bigger news with San Antonio.
I think the biggest news is your Rowdies news, to be honest.
That's true.
We'll get there in a second.
Of course. That's always biggest.
Yeah, the more minor news that James may or may not be referring to is San Antonio did make a pretty big signing this past week. They went out and brought in Kevin Lambert, which is a name everybody should know. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably have at least heard of him in some capacity.
Yeah.
Fantastic player. Obviously Jamaican national team regular. He is coming from Real Salt Lake, and again, just kind of like a bunch of great runs with Phoenix Rising in the past several seasons. If you've been around USL, like you've seen him, you know how good of a player he is. Really solid kind of defensive midfielder, just kind of a rock really in the middle of the field. Plays on the back line sometimes. I mean, this is just a huge signing. Everybody knows about his talent. Again, if you follow the USL at all, you've seen him regularly, and you know why Phoenix held on to him for 6 or 7 seasons. It was a long time. Had a brief run with Real Salt Lake, but ending up back in the USL with San Antonio. I mean, this is a huge get for San Antonio, and again, I think kind of does. Really late in the game, by the way, kind of surprising. You don't really see, at least in my head, you don't really expect to see crazy big splashes later on in the off season like this. Again,
right.
We're kind of at the end of February, March around the corner. Season's about to kick off. MLS just kicked off this past week or yesterday.
Yeah.
So kind of surprising, but a really big pickup there. Definitely the biggest of this latter part of the off season, I'd say.
Yeah,
I don't know if you characterize Jordan Farr as coming in kind of late in the offseason as well, but if you do, then they're close. I mean, that is a big one for sure.
Yeah, it was interesting that he didn't get a ton of playing time with Real Salt Lake because I think a lot more of us expected that in the USL crowd. He's been a very good player. He seemed to earn that move up to MLS, and it's unfortunate for him, but obviously that is USL's gain and ultimately San Antonio's. I think that they're building a really good squad. There's a lot of stuff online, and we'll probably get to this more in the next couple of weeks, but San Antonio supposedly do not want to be the defensive juggernaut that we know them to be. They want to play a more attacking style. And I guess that, these are a couple of moves that move them in that direction, obviously. But I think Kevin Lambert, it doesn't matter what style you play. That's going to be an upgrade over, let's say 90% of the players in his position in this league. So fair play to San Antonio. And, they're definitely looking to come into 2024 swinging for the fences again. Carlos, though, as you said, that's all minor news. That's really not that big of a deal because the people who tune into this podcast, they don't give a hoot about any team other than the Rowdies for the most part. The only other time that we care about teams that aren't the Rowdies is when we're playing them next week. That's when we have a little bit of interest.
That's true.
But
That's true.
we have some news that's related to the Rowdies. So who do we got? What's going on here?
Straight from the New England Revolution, the Rowdies have brought in midfielder Damien Rivera on loan, from the Revs in MLS. Again, Damien Rivera on loan from the New England Revolution. Last time we brought in a guy on loan from New England Revolution, he turned out to be a fantastic player and had an incredible run in his very short time here. I miss you, Ryan Spalding. Please come home. Damien Rivera, again, kind of similar position-wise. Again, kind of playing on the wing, kind of like Spalding. Lots of crosses. Robbie Nielsen said, we want dynamic guys running forward, taking shots, and making dangerous crosses. He does exactly what we want, is what he said in the press release article that they put out announcing that signing. He actually did score in his first preseason game for the Rowdies, which was this game against Montreal that we'll talk about briefly later on. So that's always a good sign to just kind of, get here, boots on the floor and immediately hit the ground running. Great start for him. You can't really ask for a better start. So yeah, it seems like he's kind of been here for I don't know how long, but they had him training with the squad for at least a little bit before that game. So don't know exactly when he arrived, but officially announced February 19th. So just a few days ago, after he played that preseason game, they kind of teased it out. They said, it was scored by number 8, a player to be announced next week. So here we are next week. They announced him on Monday. Officially, we know that Damien Rivera is on loan from New England Revolution. So again, like on loan, who knows what that means these days? It could mean he has a great run with us and gets called back very soon, like Ryan Spalding, or it means he stays with us till the end of the year after we win everything, the championship and the U.S. Open Cup, which who knows if that'll get played. But long story short, we have Damien Rivera. Seems like a great piece for competition on the wing. Again, we have guys like Blake Bodley, Moon, right? Guys that are already really solid out there. This seems like a great piece to add competition to that position. And maybe, if nothing else, depth. And we need that for sure. So I'm really, really happy with the signing. This is something that we talked about just last week, I believe, James. We talked about how there's not a lot of depth on the outsides.
You did. Yeah, you said that.
So this is a perfect addition there, and a quality addition too. Not just, some random guy that can play on the wing back. This is a guy that has a lot of potential. Played for 4 seasons, bouncing around between the senior team at New England Revolution and New England Revolution 2. Also got called up for Costa Rica U23 3 times. So, I mean, this is a guy that has a lot of potential, plays a lot of minutes, whether it's for the 2 team or the main team. He certainly does. Played 17 matches for the senior team in this time in New England. So I can see why they want to hold on to him. I can see why they're not just giving him to us. He's on loan for a reason, because I think New England sees serious potential in him as well. Maybe that manifests itself with the Rowdies. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Fantastic competition out there on the wing. And again, if nothing else, great depth piece.
Yeah, I think that the New England's Revolution Academy is actually starting to turn out some pretty good talent recently. If you follow MLS, there are a couple of guys that they have brought into the first team. Most famously, I would assume, is Diego Fagundes, but they are recently really starting to turn out some good players who are contributing to their first team. Several of them, including one who's getting call-ups for the England youth teams, much to the chagrin of we, the American fans. But yeah, it's very interesting to see that they are, obviously there are a ton of soccer players around the Boston area, in between Boston and New York. That's all like one big, kind of urban agglomeration of pretty much. So there are going to be a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds who end up playing soccer. And as you said, Damien Rivera is, I think one parent is Costa Rican and one parent is Guatemalan, something like that. So he's, got that background where he's obviously probably going to grow up playing soccer. And luckily there was the New England Revolution to provide a good background where a good place where he could do that at a high level. And just as you said, I think that he's one of the players that they see something in amongst several others. And if we can provide a platform for him to grow and succeed, I think that he can, turn that back for us and give us some success too. So I'm really excited about this signing. I always love, bringing in players on loan. I think that's
Absolutely.
great. And given, this was something that Robbie Nielsen highlighted, is that he kind of wanted to focus on more of the youth players as well. And if that
Yeah.
means players in on loan, then fair enough. But at the same time, you assume that means Damien Rivera will have at least a relationship with us if it doesn't work out with the Revolution long term. I don't hope for that, obviously. I do hope that he does succeed at the highest level and everything, like I do for any player. But at the same time, maybe we get a quality player down the line. So I think that this is good for us I think this is good for us both in the short term and potentially the long term. And if he can fill in the rest of the roster spot with similarly aged players, similar situation players, I think that we will be in a pretty good spot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, you mentioned youth. I have something to mention when we get to the preseason game as well, because certainly a bit of youth running around in that preseason game, and I'm really excited to talk about that. But yeah, Damien Rivera, big pickup. In terms of Rowdy's signings, it's not the one that's going to catch your eye, I
Right.
think, right? But it's one that's, I think, certainly impressive and important because of, again, not only the talent he has, but the depth that adds to the wing spots, which is a position that I think is pretty vulnerable to injuries just because of how much running up and down the field they have to do. So it's important to have people out there, and not just any depth pieces. Again, quality players. He seems to have a lot of potential, and he's kind of, flanked by guys that have a lot of experience in the USL already. So I think it's gonna be a good matchup for him. Good competition on the wings, but also I think hopefully, we don't really know how this locker room is going to shape out yet, but hopefully a good chemistry with all these guys that can build up a young player like him. I'm really excited to see how he plays out this year.
Yeah, I think that this is the right type of move that we should be making as an organization. So I am all on board. Seems like you are too, Carlos. Let's get everybody else who's listening on board. We are on the Damien Rivera train.
Absolutely.
Now, the next thing that we have to do is to go over the tier 1 teams in the Eastern Conference. Carlos already thinks I made a mistake after we went through last week and looked at Hartford, but we'll see how many more mistakes I've made in making these two tiers. Before we get to that, I also want to say liking and subscribing is free, but if you think you might need some new threads coming up for this year, maybe the new season that is coming up as well, we have some options for you, and you can help out our podcast at the same time by going over to shop.rblrsports.com, checking out all the designs that we've got cooked up there. There will be a link in the description, and you can use a promo code if you find something that you like to get 10% off. That is COYR. Oh, good. I did it. I pointed the right way on the video. Yeah, everybody, please do check it out. And I think that you will find something you like. And hey, if you want to check it out, as we said, 10% off COYR. We hope to see you in RBLR gear. Now, Carlos, let's get into our Eastern Conference Tier 1 teams, which does not include Hartford, but does include this. I might have done this one in a little bit more of an order. You know what? I don't think I did. But I think the team that we're listing first is probably the weakest in this top tier, in this quote-unquote top tier that I've created. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, the first team you have listed here, James, we're going in order of weakest to strongest. I think I would agree, just on paper, who we're looking at here. Indy 11 is the first team that James has listed here in his tier 1 teams. I'm going to say James because if there's any mistakes here, it's not my fault. It's his. We look back and there's like freezing cold takes by the end of the year. It's not me. Not messing with you. But yeah, Indy 11.
Hey, I would be in good company because that happens all the time with people who are, paid to do this for what? MLSsoccer.com and all these other places. So I'm feeling okay.
Yeah, people get paid to be wrong. At least we just kind of do it for fun, right?
Yeah, so exactly. I just like being wrong.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I don't think you're wrong about is Indy being the weaker of this bunch. Indy 11 made a couple big signings this year, the biggest of which I think being Augustin Williams, fantastic striker who left Charleston this year. And Charleston, I think, to the surprise of nobody, is also on this list of tier 1 teams, and we'll talk about them in a second. But when I heard about that move, I thought Charleston might be psychotic. What the hell are you doing? I mean, you're letting go of one of your best players. They figured it out. But in terms of Indy 11, this is a huge signing. Yeah. He's got a bunch of other really solid
a season all on his own.
Exactly. Yeah, he's one of those players that can put up just a bunch of goals. You give him the right cast around him to do that, you're in good shape. And I certainly do think Indy has a good cast to support him. And one of those being former Rowdy Sebastian Guinzotti. I think they could make a really interesting duo up top, but I'm not really sure Augustin Williams' play style is accustomed to having like another striker up there with him. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. If they're both playing at the same time, Guinzotti kind of drops into more of like a false nine role. There's a lot to talk about there, and it is going to be really, really interesting because Sebastian Guinzotti didn't have a standout year last year, but he had a productive season. He certainly has a ton left to give for Indy. In the midfield, though, Indy still has a bunch of other great players, also former Rowdy, Jack Blake. You also have Cam Lindley in there. Aiden Quinn re-signed. I mean, there's some solid players that re-signed, and then they went out and grabbed a guy like Tyler Gibson as well, who we mentioned a couple episodes when that signing happened. Like, this is a team that has a lot of great support, I think, in the midfield. Good players in the midfield that I think are good enough to support Augustin Williams in his mission of carrying this team to glory single-handedly, because he can do that, right? Like you said. So I'm not totally sold, but there's a lot of talent in the midfield, I think. And I wouldn't be surprised if they end up being like much better than we think, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they're, again, kind of like 5th, 6th, because there's a lot of really good teams in this conference. Indy is one of those good teams. I just don't think right now I'm sold on them being elite, like top 3 team or anything like that. But certainly good players. It's going to be tough to bring that all together. Good consistency in the midfield, though. They're bringing back 3 really important midfielders, like I said. So guys that were already there last year. It's not like they're rebuilding something, but they're adding on to it right now. And I think that's really important. So there's potential there. I don't know how much. I don't know. I'm not totally sold, but again, Augustin Williams, Augie Williams being up there is huge. So he's a big wild card in terms of how well or how mediocre their season goes. It won't go poorly. They have too good of a team to go poorly this year. But I think it'll go between really elite, surprisingly, or just kind of 5th, 6th place as of now. That's what it feels like right now. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if they're much better than what I think.
Yeah, I agree with that generally. I just want to highlight 2 other things real fast. The manager for Indy 11 is a guy who's a little bit out of left field, Sean McCauley.
That's right, yeah.
Grew up playing throughout, let's say Northern England and Scotland. Was a Scotland U21 international for all of 1 game. But he had some time as an interim coach with Minnesota United for like 2 years when they were, I guess it says 2023 to 24, but I guess that was, after they lost a very long-term coach at Minnesota United. That is not Manchester United, where he started his career as a kid. But now he is the head coach after only being an interim and a caretaker manager at Sheffield Wednesday. And those were back at the last time he was there is 2010. So that one's just a little bit funky. I don't really know exactly what to make of them. That's kind of like with Danny Dichio at Detroit City. I was just giving, this team a bit better judgment with the roster that they have. And the only other thing that I wanted to highlight, other than what you had already said, Carlos, was the defense. They did have a couple of pretty good defenders last season. I think that they really shored up that back line by bringing in Callum Chapman-Page, who was previously with Miami, and then Danny Barbier, who was previously with Oakland Roots, to help out at center back. Then they have Aiden Stanley, another player who's previously with Miami. He will be their left back more than likely. That's obviously where he played for them. And I believe their right back is this guy named Josh O'Brien. Josh O'Brien was born in Ireland, grew up in California, then went back to Britain to play his, the early part of his career. And since has moved back, obviously, now with Indy 11. He's a player that I really don't know what to make of just because of his career path so far. But it seems like that could be a pretty good upgrade, those 4 guys in the defensive unit. And if they have a good defensive unit, then they obviously, like you said, they already have a pretty good midfield, some pretty good options up top, including somebody who can change games all on his own. So, yeah, that's where I came up with the idea of putting Indy 11 in this tier. But anyway, that was the couple of other bits I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, the coaching note is big. because again, I think that's also just kind of a wild card. By no means am I saying he's going to be a bad coach. We just don't really know anything about him.
Exactly.
Indy 11 is a professional enough of an organization to, I think, know if they have a decent enough coach on their hands. So, yeah, I don't think any of these teams we're going to talk about, or most teams in the USL are going to go out and just snag like a randomly unqualified coach for no reason. He's probably got something, you know what I mean? He's probably got something, maybe, I don't know. Someone knows him and they see, I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm explaining myself right. But it's going to be a bit of a wild card because, again, we don't really know anything about him. So I'm curious. Keep an eye on Indy 11. Again, I think this is a team that can be really good, and maybe surprise us with like a top 4 finish. They have the players to do it, honestly. Like they could if they bring it together.
If they bring it together. Yeah,
it's a big if, right? So we'll have to see. Very, very good team. Keep an eye on them. James, next team. This is a fun one. I don't know. I don't know if you're still going in order here.
No, this one we had I think the worst of this top tier first, and then after that, don't consider that in any other type of order.
Okay, no order from here on out for these last few teams. No order. One of the teams that I think might be one of the best on this tier 1 list is Charleston Battery, who had a bit of an exodus of their own for a little bit, and I think there was a bit of question marks for me around what this team was going to look like because they were losing guys left and right. I mean, AJ Cochran, Declan Wynn. I'm just looking at the sheet. Andrew Booth, Augie Williams, Derek Dodson, Trey Muse, Fidel Barajas, Tristan Trey. Like they lost a bunch of different guys that seemed pretty key to their team at some point or another. I was a little curious because I was like, this team was really good last year. Obviously, they kind of had the title in the palm of their hand and blew it at the end. So in my head, I'm like, why not just keep the same team? I thought they would kind of fight pretty hard to keep everybody together. Ultimately, that didn't really happen. They made a couple big re-signings, but more important than the re-signings, I think, are the additions. And you mentioned someone like Aaron Malloy, who we talked a lot about when that signing happened. One of the biggest signings of the offseason. Aaron Malloy coming to Charleston to really, really improve that midfield is really incredible. Another player you might know is Jake LaCava, former Rowdy, making his way to Charleston to play under former Rowdy's president, Lee Cohen. D. Myers, another player we've mentioned in the past briefly in an episode. Like Jackson Conway is a player you might remember. He scored against the Rowdies in that first game back with fans from COVID. By the way, just a random tidbit. There was like 50 fans in attendance. He was there and he scored against us when he was playing for Atlanta United too. Really, really good player who I'm surprised hasn't really managed to break through out of like the 2-team system in Atlanta.
Right.
Hopefully he gets his chance with Charleston, just not against us, because I think he's a really likable guy and a great player. I know JD, if you're listening to this, JD loves his kid for whatever reason. Jackson Conway, fantastic player as well. So great depth piece up top as well. I mean, maybe even a starter, who knows? So Charleston has a lot of different players here, and I'm sure I missed a couple. Just kind of looking over the roster and who they have right now. Continuity is something I was a bit concerned about for them, just because there wasn't, like, they were losing a lot of players, but they made some key re-signings. It's not like they're losing everybody either. They're adding to their team. James, you noted that you think they've improved. So I'm curious to see what you think about Charleston. I'm not sure. I'm not really sold about them having improved, but Aaron Malloy, like single-handedly you could make an argument with just him in the central midfield that he, pulls his team up, even just a little bit. He's a huge, huge signing for them.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Aaron Malloy is going to be a huge signing anywhere he goes in this league, but bringing him in was probably the biggest part of it. Like you said, Jake LaCava, MD Myers, those are 2 big pieces, especially up top. I think that MD Myers could well replace what they had with Augustine Williams last year, because as good as he is, he wasn't super productive for Charleston Battery. We've definitely seen him be more productive anyway. I'll leave it there. Diego Gutierrez came in from Portland Timbers too. He was another very good college player. I think that he's going to have a high ceiling in the USL. Unfortunate that it wasn't, it was too big of a jump, I guess, right now for him to really catch on in MLS. But yeah, he's going to be a good player. And then the other one that I wanted to highlight was center back Graham Smith. Graham Smith went to Oregon State and Denver and was drafted to play with Sporting Kansas City. He was with them for a while, not super great with, SKC and MLS. So he went to Memphis and he had 2 good years there, and he followed Aaron Malloy to Charleston Battery. So I think that they have a really good roster to work with. The only thing that stands out for me, because obviously they still have a very good manager, Ben Pierman, who got them to the final last year. Everybody thought that they were going to be able to beat Phoenix. I really don't know even how many Phoenix fans expected to win that game. Let's say going up into stoppage time of that game too.
That game was wild.
But the only thing that I see looking at this roster right now, and unless I'm missing players on it, is I don't see a good high-level starting goalkeeper. They have 2 names, Daniel Kuzemka and Adam Grinwis. If you don't know those names immediately, that's understandable. But, there are guys who bounce around the USL, MLS, Reserve League as reserve players. So if they don't have a good goalkeeper, that will significantly impact things. A good goalkeeper will keep you in games, will win you extra points. A bad goalkeeper will lose you points. Unfortunately, with Matt Turner in net, just ask Nottingham Forest. I guess that's a swipe at JD while you were just talking about him. But either way, I did want to highlight that when we were talking about Charleston. They have a lot of potential. They have a lot of good pieces, especially the manager, but they will need to, unless I'm missing something, which I might be, they do need to go out and get a goalkeeper to fill in there. And that's the only big thing that I see potentially missing.
Yeah. I mean, again, just kind of a good team. I think just solid team as is. Could be up there in the elite. Maybe is up there in the elite. I'm just not totally sold that they're better than they were last year, because last year's roster was like really, really good, and the chemistry they were able to build really quickly was really impressive.
That's true.
Maybe that's to the credit of their coaching staff, though, and maybe they're able to bring this new squad together very, very quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised. So Charleston, fantastic team. One team that this is definitely way out of order, James. I don't know what you're doing here. This next team, I certainly don't think is better than Charleston. I don't know where they are in comparison to Indy 11, but Birmingham is a team that haven't really added a lot, but like you said on your notes here, James, hasn't lost much from the 2023 season either.
Right.
They've cut most of their big names, but there's some names to mention that kind of left them, sadly for them, at the end of the year, including Juan Agudelo, Nico Brett, Anderson Esiedu, big players. Agudelo, obviously a fantastic forward who is known pretty well around the league at this point. Nico Brett, again, kind of no need to introduce him. Fantastic forward. Sorry about that. But not a ton of additions. They brought in Stefano Pino, who I think is a really good player and just underrated in this league. I think he'll do a decent enough job replacing Juan Agudelo, but Nico Brett has big shoes to fill, to be honest. So curious to see how this team plays out. Matt Van Okel in goal. I kind of just expect them to be where they were last year, to be honest.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But Enzo Martinez is still there. That's a player that you would love to have on your team, but you hate to play against.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Corcoran. I mean, it's roster-wise a good enough team. Stefano Pino, I think, is a good enough forward. I don't know much else about their other additions. So I'm curious to see how that plays together. If they're kind of just rocking with what they did last year and then plugging in those new forwards that they brought in. I don't imagine they make a jump from last year, but like you're saying, I don't imagine they drop off either at all. Kind of around the same place, mid upper table.
Yeah, I would say mid-upper table is probably where they're headed here. There are 2 things that I wanted to note other than what you have already gone through, Carlos, because that was most of the players on the roster that are going to be either important additions or, as you said, some notable subtractions here. But Matthew Corcoran will be turning 18 this year, specifically. Oh, no, I'm wrong about that. His birthday is already passed. He only turned 17. So as it happens, I was under the wrong impression. I was expecting him to leave this year. If he is 17, then he will not be moving to Europe at least until June of 2025. So never mind. That is ruled out. Matthew Corcoran will be in Birmingham at least all of this year, unless he moves to MLS or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he would want to do that based on the career path he's already taken. So we
Yeah,
will ignore that talking point. The second talking point I had is the other striker that they brought in. His name is Mohamed Bouya Toure. I don't know if it is literally Booyah or if I'm saying that incorrectly, but could be kind of a baller name.
I think there's an R in there. Isn't it Boura? Like Boura?
I didn't see that in what I was looking at, but maybe I am looking at the wrong sources here.
Sorry,
Either
I could be
way, he
butchering that.
originally from Sierra Leone. He played for a bunch of teams in Sweden, and based off of one good year, moved to China. Didn't have the best time there and came back to Sweden and then Denmark. They signed him from the Danish top division. So this guy is a bit of a wild card for us because I don't have a ton of information on him. I don't have the access to Y Scout or the other sources where, coaching staffs will probably look and get their stats and whatever. But Mr. Torre, he probably will, have an impact on this team, obviously on the attacking side. And I just don't know what that is going to be. Is that going to be 5 goals? Is that going to be 10 goals? Is that going to be 15 goals? We just don't know. He's 29, so you would assume that he's roughly around the peak of his powers as a soccer player. But he is kind of an unknown for us. And if he turns out to be a really important player, then obviously Birmingham will, congratulate themselves on the good scouting and everything. But he could turn out to be something important, or right now we're just not sure if that's going to happen.
Yeah, he was, by the way, the top scorer in the Swedish league in 2019. So, I mean, this guy's not messing around. It wasn't that long ago either. It's not like he's like kind of fallen off at all.
Right.
He's in his athletic prime-ish right now. 29 years old, 4 years ago, scored 15 goals for a team that I know, and I see their logo and I know their name all the time, but I cannot pronounce their name, so I'm not going to try it. But it has a D, and then it's Djurgårdens after that. I'm sorry if you're Swedish and I'm butchering. Like, I'm not even gonna try and say it because it's just.
If you're Swedish, send us a phonetic.
It would be
a phonetic written out way.
It would feel like offensive to try and pronounce the name of this club without properly knowing how to do that. But he was their leading goal scorer and the leading goal scorer in the entire league, 2019 with 15 goals. In his first year of professional soccer, he was playing for some other club in Sweden that I don't know anything about. I'm trying to figure it out. Oh, it's like. Maybe it was like the 2nd or 3rd division in Sweden, and he scored 32 goals in 25 games.
That's a pretty good result. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, that. So I'm throwing that out there because that's just pretty crazy. I just saw it stat right now. So again, kind of a wild card, but an interesting wild card for sure. I think kind of a weird move to make from Sweden to the USL, 29 years old. So kind of random. Wouldn't say it's like up or down or lateral. I don't really know. But he's not messing around. Top scorer 2019 in Sweden, and it looks like a good player. So keep an eye on him because we'll have to see how that plays out. Like you said, certainly going to contribute. But what does that mean numbers-wise?
Right.
What does that convert to in goals? Keep an eye on him.
Yeah, I think that'll be the main thing that we have to watch out for as Rowdies fans. Now, moving on to the next team. Honestly, Carlos, you had a problem with where Hartford was placed last week. This week, I think that there are 2 teams that could have potentially replaced them in the quote-unquote lower tier, and that is possibly Indy 11, but I'm more so leaning towards this team just because it's going to be hard for all of these guys to gel under the circumstances. So the team that I'm talking about is very close by to Hartford. It is Rhode Island FC. Rhode Island is joining the USL as, I guess you could say, an expansion team, but this will be their first year regardless. They have put together what on paper looks like a pretty darn good roster. I don't want to, I don't want to lie about any part of that. It's just the only thing that I see is putting it together. All of these guys, I don't think many of them have played together before. They've been all over the league or college or, even abroad in a couple of cases. So it's going to be interesting to see if all of these guys can work together and put it together over the course of a year. Obviously, they're professional footballers, so they're going to be better at it than, most people. But at the same time, doing so in a way that gets you into the playoffs, that gets you into a home position in the playoffs, that gets you into put themselves in a position where they could win a trophy. Who can say? But yeah, they do have a very good roster right now. And I think that that's headlined among many good players by last year's Golden Boot winner, Albert Dequa from Pittsburgh Riverhounds. He went and he joined Rhode Island for their first season. So yeah, I am high on this team based on their potential. But putting it together is going. It's just going to be. Can they do that?
Yeah, and one thing again to keep an eye on as well is I don't know much about their head coach. I'm looking at his bio, and he was an assistant at Birmingham Legion for the past 4 seasons, and is now making a jump to a head coaching role with Rhode Island, which making a jump to a new coaching role is usually difficult as is. Doing that in a team that hasn't existed yet, I'm sure is even much more of a challenge, because not only do you have to kind of get these guys to play together, but none of them have played together. Like, it's not like you have any continuity. You don't have a team captain from last year showing you the ropes, showing you around, showing you what they did. There's no culture to build on. Like, you have to build all of that. So yeah, for a first year head coach, I think this is quite a challenge. I can't imagine that they will be like top 2 or top 3 on paper. They have a really, really good roster. Like we've talked about a lot this offseason. I think they'll score a lot of goals. I mean, you have Dequa up top with JJ Williams, former Rowdy, obviously, who had a great year with us last year. Putting those two up top together is just a lot of goals, right? I don't know much else about how this team will gel together. That's it. I mean, they have the roster for it. Like you said, they have the roster to bring it together. I do think this is a really, really difficult challenge for Kano Smith, the Bermudian manager, who's taking up, again, his first coaching role with a team that hasn't existed yet. That's a really tough ask. I think if you're looking just at the roster, this team should be above a team like Hartford. But that's the key, is bringing that all together in a way that's effective for a team that, again, has not existed. This is the first time they're playing a full season or a game. It's going to be a curious case study for sure. And we'll just have to see how it plays out, because this will be a challenge. It's hard. Like, I'm trying to think of the last time I can think of a coach, just first coaching gig being an expansion team. Thinking across MLS or USL, it just feels kind of rare. I might be making that up. Maybe it's happened before. I don't imagine it's the first time, but it's going to be really difficult, I'm sure.
Yeah. I agree with you. Again, putting it all together, that's the name of the game for a lot of these clubs, of course, but it's especially difficult under these circumstances. The only other thing that I wanted to highlight is a player from Ireland, Mark Doyle. This is another guy who's a bit of a question mark for us, because we don't know what his ceiling is as a USL player. He is originally from Dublin and played for a couple of teams in the Irish League. The Irish League isn't known as, a powerhouse, but obviously that's where we got Jordan Doherty the second time around. And, he can play as a winger or a striker. It looks to me, based on his numbers, that he would be more of a winger. And there are, I think New England, especially the Boston area, are known for Irish immigrants. So maybe he's got a good, solid history to build upon there, at least in the cultural sense. And it'll be interesting to see how it turns out for him on the field too. And can he be the guy who serves the goals that Albert Dequa ultimately is going to try to put in the net, or JJ Williams, because he's 6'4".
One of the original hotspots of U.S. soccer, one of the birthplaces of U.S. soccer, was just a half-hour drive away from Rhode Island, a small city called Fall River. If you're a random soccer history nerd, you would have heard of them, because they were like the most dominant U.S. Open Cup team back in the day. Like, we're talking like 1910s, 1920s. So, I mean, there's a lot of people over there that still have soccer like in their blood. Because that, like, they're hotspot, like birthplace of U.S. soccer in some ways up there. So it's kind of cool that there's a professional soccer team serving that area, like that specific area, not like New England Revolution for the Boston area. So I'm sure they'll get good support as well. I've seen good support good like interactions with their tweets. Seems like season tickets are going pretty well for them. So I hope they do well, like as a club, obviously, just not against us, of course, but I successful clubs are good for this league. I think that's gonna be a really interesting place to have a team.
Yeah, I agree. As many teams as we can get on the map, provided that there are stable ownership groups, then I'm happy with that. The last team that we are going to cover in our preview of the Eastern Conference tonight, because we are not doing a separate one for the Rowdies. I think everybody here listening already knows where we would put them in terms of tiers. And also, we're going to do something that's kind of separate just for the Rowdies before we have our first game, naturally. So I think that we'll just save it for them. The last team that we will cover is Louisville City. Louisville City, I think that they are all, they're always a strong organization, and they do look like a strong organization again this year. The only issue that I have right now is I don't think that they are at the same level that they have been. I think that they are lesser now than we have seen them in a while. But what does that mean with Louisville City? I mean, you've still got a bunch of guys that they have been there for nearly 200 appearances, over 200 appearances. Some of these guys, it's kind of crazy. They lost a couple of bigger names from last year. They still have Wilson Harris, who was their leading scorer, I believe, last year, and they're trying to institute the youth movement a lot more, it seems.
Yeah.
I'm just, I am down on them in comparison to where they have been. That doesn't mean that they're a bad team. That doesn't mean that they're not going to do well this year. I just don't know exactly where they're going to turn out at this point. It doesn't look to me like they should be challenging for a top 1, 2, maybe even 3 position in the East. But if they, start to get a run going, then that could change very quickly.
Yeah, they have enough guys on here that could cause problems. There's enough good players on this roster. It's Louisville. Like, they always have a decent enough squad.
Exactly.
Decent enough is putting it lightly. But again, they did lose some of those big names, like you said, kept a bunch of them. Wilson Harris, I think, is the biggest one of those because he is a fantastic striker and he's young. Some of Louisville's best players are not like old by any means, but they're certainly they're aging every year, obviously. You start to lose a bit of your physicality, a bit of your speed. And Wilson Harris has so much to give, obviously, because he's such a young guy. So he's going to be their key. They did re-sign guys like Brian Ownby, who's someone, like you said, has been there for a long time. Danny Fonda is in goal for them. Who else? They still have Elijah Winder on their bench, so that's cool. But Sean Toach is a fantastic center back. So they have guys like up and down the field, but it's definitely not the mysticism of Louisville City. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's a consistent title winner isn't really there anymore, like it has been in the past. But certainly a good enough organization to put it together and win enough games to qualify for the playoffs. Obviously, I think that's going to go without saying for them. It's kind of a bare minimum, I think, for them. But they were close to kind of falling out of that last year. Remember, it's just it hasn't really been the same Louisville past couple seasons, but especially last year. I think it kind of really came to light for USL fans that this sort of dynasty they had going with all those players that have played like almost 200 games for them, like you said, it's kind of falling off slowly. Well, at this point, not as slowly anymore, but kind of falling off before our eyes. So I don't imagine it's very much longer before they put it together and kind of start coming back and being that Louisville that they used to be. I just don't think it's going to be this season.
That's exactly what I think too. The guys that are their core players, they're getting to a point where the age might actually impact them and their ability. And then the guys who are the youth movement, that I applaud them for, trying to incorporate youth players. That's awesome. They've already sold Josh Winder, as we've talked about previously. And you already mentioned his brother is on the team right now, but the couple of players that I do want to highlight real quickly are another academy player for Louisville City. That's Carlos Mogel. He started playing for the senior team in 2021, and last year was his breakout year. He became effectively the starter as a defensive midfielder. In front of him was Ray Serrano, who's originally from Washington State, but he has been with Louisville City for the past 2 seasons now, and he is usually, like I said, playing in front of Carlos Mogel, and then they have somebody, I believe last year it would have been probably Tyler Gibson or Paolo Del Piccolo, who was the number 8 next to them, but Mogel as the number 6, Serrano as something of a number 10. I think that those are two very interesting players. I think that probably this year it will be Taylor Davila, who was with Rio Grande Valley last year and was actually USL Championship All League first team in 2023. He will probably be the guy who's running alongside those two to, help carry the ball forward and carry the whole attack forward. If they can, put it together again, obviously it's that whole thing, but they do have a ton of really good pieces, and they did bring in at least one very good defender, Arturo Ordonez from Pittsburgh, to try and shore up what seems to be a bit of an aging back line that we already talked about. But yeah, I think Louisville are good. I just don't think they're what we've seen in the past, and they will probably be able to get there, but I think that's closer to 2025 than 2024.
Totally. Yeah, that's right.
All right.
I think that's a good take.
Well, with all of that, we have gotten through our Eastern Conference preview, both Tier 1 and Tier 2. We'll see which teams make me look bad. I hope it's not Hartford. But if we do, then Carlos, you get to choose. You get to choose what Hartford finishing in the top half, what that means for RBLR Rowdies podcast, because I feel like we need to have some type of responsibility for these posts, right? It can't just be for us and nobody else.
Yeah, we can't just be Alexi Lawless, like spitting bad takes and getting no repercussions for it. We gotta make you like jump into the bay by the stadium or something after a game.
You know what? Tampa Bay Sun coming up. They will be playing right next to Hillsborough River. So maybe.
Oh my God!
Like
don't jump into that river by downtown. No, don't do that. Do not do that. I mean, that's just a bad idea for a variety of reasons. So we'll keep that in mind, though.
All right. Well, folks, if you have any ideas, we will also take those. Now, let's get into our extra time. Carlos, let's talk real quickly about this preseason game, because we took a long time to get there. But as we said, nobody was able to go to this one. While the team was playing in 60-something degree weather and getting rained on, I was standing in a line in 60-something degree weather and getting rained on. At least if I had been at the game, I would have been able to stand under the big awning there. But Carlos, what did you get out of this game if you were able to get much from it?
Big takeaway, I'll just say that we're scoring goals, which is good to see at this point in the preseason.
Yes,
like, that's not something you can always say in the preseason. You're always kind of like seeing 1-1 results, 0-0 results, 1-0 results. We scored 4 goals. Cal Jennings got on the score sheet first for us, equalized it in the 32nd minute. A Rowdies player who was at the time to be announced scored a goal in the 37th minute. We now know that's Damien Rivera. Arteaga got on the score sheet in the 47th minute, which is, I think, one of the ones I want to note in particular, again, because he's somebody we're expecting to score a lot of goals, obviously, during the season, in conjunction with Cal Jennings. And Arteaga and Jennings both have now scored. Actually, I don't know about Jennings. I don't want to say any false statements, but I know for sure Arteaga has now scored multiple times this preseason of the games we know about. Jennings might have as well, but it doesn't really matter. It's preseason. Point is, Jennings is scoring as well, so we're there. And then the 77th minute, Christian Ortiz, a preseason trialist who is one of these youth players who I think actually plays for Florida Premier Academy, where Georgie Christov works over there. So yeah, one of Georgie Christov's kids got on the score sheet, which is cool to see. There's a picture of Georgie and this kid Christian after the game taking a picture together on the field. So
that's awesome.
Who knows? Maybe it's the passing of a torch from one legend to a future legend in Christian Ortiz. There's not really any word on whether he, signs an academy contract, becomes a full-time player. Who knows? I don't know. It's possible. But I haven't really seen anything on that front. Don't imagine we'll get any crazy, unexpected news. But he's there. It's good to see Rowdy's youth involved in the preseason. I don't imagine they just include them for no reason, I'm sure if he's playing, it means there's a chance that he gets some sort of contract with this squad. I wouldn't just throw out random youth players to fill in slots when, you need to get guys minutes. Lots of guys got minutes. Rowdy started with Jordan Farr in net. Brano came in the 60th minute. Doherty was out there on the field, replaced by Trialis later on. Forrest Lasso, Kleeman were also on the field. a couple more trialists. One of them was replaced by Crisostomo in the 70th minute. Lewis Hilton, Blake Bodley, again replaced by trialists in the 60th minute. Arteaga, Jennings, and Perez came in the 60th minute for Jennings. So tons of players getting minutes here. Most of the big players and the guys we want to see getting consistent minutes together. I'm looking in particular at the back line. I want to see that back line really gel, especially with a new goalie in Jordan Farr, who I'm going to assume gets a starting spot over Breno. Yeah, Lasso, Kleeman playing together, Doherty playing back there. But again, tons of other players getting good minutes. It's really important at this point to do that. And lots of trialists still getting minutes as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we get 1, max 2 more trialists sign on to the team going forward. Maybe one of those is this kid, Christian Ortiz, who got kind of a nice little tap-in goal to start, I guess, his professional career. So happy for him. And yeah, if you were at the game, kudos to you.
Kudos.
Heard there was enough people there to sell out of the Rowdies jersey in the stadium, so that's cool. Of the allotment they had there, my dad was able to snag one.
Nice.
One for me and one for himself. He braved the cold, and we were FaceTiming throughout the game, so I got to see a little bit of it through a tiny screen. But yeah, it was a good game. I'm glad some people were able to go watch it and see what this product was starting to look like. I know my dad's breakdown is always a bit rough in how he describes things. He's pretty funny, and listening to him break down some of these games, he was like, yeah, everybody just kind of sucks right now. It's raining, so you can't really tell. But that kind of started to come together in the 30th minute once we started to get that first goal. It looked like Montreal might kind of just score and hold on to it, maybe win like 2-0, 3-1 or something like that, because they scored really early on. But no, their Rowdy squad was a really resilient bunch to do that in the rain. Cold, rainy Saturday night. Montreal couldn't do it, but we could. All this means to me is that we should have promotion and relegation, and we should get promoted over Montreal. So take that with a grain of salt. No, I'm joking. We can do promotion relegation episode another day if you really want to, but oh man, like we get into the weeds with that. But long story short, your Tampa Bay Rowdies snagged a nice preseason win against a quality opponent in Montreal. Their next preseason game, which was supposed to be against the University of Tampa yesterday, was canceled. That did not get played. Don't know. So nothing really happened on that front. I believe the next one would be against USF. I don't remember when that game's going to be, so I'm not going to say anything right now. But yeah, a couple more preseason games left on the docket. Keep an eye on that. And yeah, we're coming up on crunch time.
Yes, we are. That is true. That is true. Yeah, so that will do it for the Rowdies news this week. The last thing that I wanted to hit on was solidarity to the striking refs with MLS. I am firmly on the referee side, and that is not just because I am firmly now in the last 2-3 months anti-MLS. I think MLS has signed Messi and said that they can do whatever the hell they want. Soccer in America be damned overall. It seems like they're doing everything possible to burn any goodwill they might have had. So I just don't I don't understand the mindset there, but I'm not one of the rich owners who appears to be driving all of these changes. Either way, putting all of that aside, because I don't want to go down any type of rabbit hole, I will say solidarity with the refs. Yeah, we could. But solidarity with the refs, they, deserve what they deserve. That's what they're asking for. They're asking for something that is effectively, normal conditions for the type of travel, the type of work, the type of everything that goes into being a referee, because there's a lot of logistics behind that. It's not just, they get the guy who's closest to New York Red Bulls arena in New Jersey. They have people who have day jobs too. A lot of these people have day jobs. So they have to, miss time, and they have to make sure that what they're missing time for is something that is worthwhile. And that's monetarily too, because otherwise you're not getting paid from your other job. So I think that they do deserve what they're asking for, and I am on their side in this. And again, it is not just because of my bias, but that is also not helping MLS's case here. So I am with the refs, and I think that we can hope that they get at least what they deserve out of this. Carlos,
I'm not going to trash talk MLS too much, because one of my professors is a former MLS commish. So if you're listening to this, professor, please give me a good grade. I'm not saying anything bad about you. But let's get those MLS teams to Open Cup, man. What are we doing here?
Yeah, for real. Now, with that soapbox out of the way, Carlos, you and I can finally step off of that, and we can end this podcast as well. Thank you,
At
everyone.
just the hour mark.
Yes, that is it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will get you out of here now. Please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, everywhere. We are at RBLR Sports. And if you would like to get at me and tell me anything about my stupid tiers that I've created for our previews, you can do that at RBLR James K. What about you, Carlos?
At Carlos TPA10 on Twitter. In 10 minutes, less than that now, my team, my first love, Liga de Quito, plays in what's essentially the Super Cup of South America between the champion of the Sudamericana, us, versus the champion Libertadores, Fluminense of Brazil. It's going to be a dogfight, first legs tonight. I'm probably going to be tweeting about that all night. So when this comes out, if you're confused about why I'm tweeting about South American soccer, that's it. Rowdies content coming soon, though, because it's crunch time. It's almost time.
Yep. And if you want to hear us covering the rest of that up until and through the rest of the season, of course, please like and subscribe to our podcast. You can get the full experience on YouTube. If you would prefer to just listen to us, you can do that on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple or Google Podcasts. It does not matter where, we are there. For another week closer to the start of the season, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.